Did I expect us to go through the whole season without losing at home? No, not really. Have we played poorly and yet still picked up results this season? Yes, we have. Did I expect a Newcastle team decimated by injuries and with only one away win this season to come to Villa Park and stake a 3-0 lead? No, I did not. And did I expect Eddie Howe to pull off a tactical double over Unai Emery in the same season? Absolutely, I didn't expect that. A lot to unpack here. Aston Villa 1, Newcastle United 3. Always for me, after a performance like that, the question is, are we in a blip, or is this a longer, more worrisome trend that we should be concerned about? Because you could probably go farther back than the Burnley game at the end of last year. Some even suggest that since the Manchester City win, we just haven't had the same kind of energy about us, which also underlines what a remarkable year it was last year and how hard it is to replicate that kind of a year. That's the scary part. And fair play as well to Newcastle. I mean, on aggregate, 8 goals for, 2 allowed in the 2 games this season. And when you think back to opening day and even Tuesday night, that scoreline probably flatters us, which means that Unai Emery is going to lock himself in his secret laboratory and try to figure out what went wrong for next year, or in case we meet somehow in the cup. A lot of streaks came to an end on Tuesday, and obviously the most stinging of those was the home undefeated streak. And is there a risk when you've had so much success over the year at your home venue that, you know, maybe there's a little bit of complacency that creeps in, a little less hunger, kind of like, yeah, we know the first goal is going to come for us, and then we'll just go from there. And even if we concede first, we could still turn things around. And you know, sometimes when you're watching a game, a player makes a run and he pops, and the passes, they pop, and the shots, they pop. I didn't see any of that on Tuesday until Leon Bailey came on. The first goal in this game ended a 10-year goalless drought for the Toon at Villa Park. The last player to score for the Magpies at VP in 2013 was Yohan Gouffran, if you could believe it. And you know, we're not the only club that struggles when we fall behind, and we have found ways to claw our way back in the game. But something felt different about this game somehow. This game was actually the complete reversal of our 3-0 win last year. And as far as quirky stats go, that was the first time Aston Villa has ever lost when referee John Brooks was in charge. Isn't that weird? And my optimism level was pretty high going into this game already. When I saw Brooks was going to be the referee, I thought, oh, what could possibly go wrong here? And now I promise you I will never bring up that stat ever again. One thing that was kind of lost on the occasion of Ezri Konsa's 150th Premier League appearance for Aston Villa, he won't have loved the 1-0 goal, but still, what an achievement there. But his old Brentford teammate Ollie Watkins scored his 50th Premier League goal, and he did it faster than any other villain in history, which is incredible. That includes Dwight York and Gabby Agbonlahor. Now, in the context of an almost 150-year-old club, that is an incredible achievement that was kind of glossed over with the disappointment of the result. And he almost made it 51 goals for Villa moments later. But despite being very good at staying onside this year, he was an inch off. Wouldn't that have been something? Welcome to the Holy Trinity show. The deflating air of a loss hangs heavy like pyrotechnic smoke in the parlor. I had forgotten what it felt like to lose at home since the 4-2 Arsenal defeat just over a year ago. Senior Holy Trinity show correspondent Samir Gaby was on hand, taking it all in. I had to deliberate internally quite a bit to come up with the 3 key issues or moments that defined this game, because it was equal parts tactical and application-oriented issues. It says an awful lot that Newcastle had as many big or quality chances as they did without having the lion's share of possession or even shots on target. And it felt to me like we were second best in so many 1v1 duels, and that played out in the Duels Won stats card, which also factors 68% aerial duel success won by the visitors. Not surprising for a team that has Botman and Byrne in its ranks. One of the individual battles that really summed up this game was Matt Cash versus Dan Byrne. And I don't have access to individual one-on-one battles between specific players, but I can tell you that Cash had a tough old time against Dan Byrne, and when you're being stifled, and I mean suffocated in midfield, that's especially when you need your fullbacks to be wide, high, and to occasionally provide a spark. And that simply wasn't the case, and especially when we tried the long, slow, floated switch to either he or Moreno. The visitors gobbled that up all evening. I was very curious to see how Unai Emery would respond with his comments afterwards, and as usual, he's very good at this. Classy, very calm, and he's right. Nobody can argue that Newcastle did not deserve to win this game based on the first hour, at least. I mean, they were the better team, and that was enough to get it done. He also said that this loss was going to happen eventually, so let's park it, let's respond, and start another streak. I did find it a bit cheeky, though, that he said that Newcastle is a bigger candidate to be in the top 7 than us, which was mildly passive-aggressive from our manager. Paul Handsaker of 24/7 Services was at Villa Park, which means his live in-person winning streak at VP is over. And here he's pictured with a fellow named Darren Dodd, a regular viewer of this show. Thank you so much, Darren. Darren picks Paul out of the crowd, heads straight over, and Paul's like, oh my God, does this guy want to fight me now? No, he just wanted his picture taken. And here's the only positive news from Tuesday. 24/7 Services, the magnificent sponsor of this show, has a brand spanking new website. It's not fully populated yet. A website never really is it? But it is live now. This is a game changer for the company, by the way. They'll be so much easier to find and connect with. Like if you're on a phone, just hit the local office number and you'll be connected, which is critical for emergencies. But there's contact forms as well, and also you'll be able to find them easier on the web. Big shout out to Alan Spears, who designed the site here in Vancouver, Canada. Cammy Beattie built the site in Scotland. So it was a multinational, global effort to get 24/7 their fancy new website. Big issue number 3, pedestrian performance. The thing that flummoxed me about this game was that we looked stale. And Newcastle were the ones that had 24 hours less to prepare for this game, and yet they were the ones buzzing around, snapping into challenges, swarming us with the press, and virtually every single time they had a transitional moment, it looked like they were going to counter and score. Until Leon Bailey came on, as I referenced earlier, we just didn't have any of that. Bailey only got garbage minutes at the end of the FA Cup game at Chelsea, which was kind of weird. It made me wonder, well, is he carrying some kind of knock or something? Because I was surprised he didn't start against Newcastle, and you would have never known that he was carrying some kind of a problem at Newcastle. He provided so much spark, energy, class, opportunities almost by himself. And you know, even if he isn't doing it by himself, he's providing the threat that the opponents have to worry about, which maybe then gives somebody else an opening to get into. I'd be shocked if he didn't start at Sheffield United. Conversely, Yuri Tielemans still looks like a player who's trying to catch up with the pace of the Premier League, and to criticize him for that would, in my opinion, be both ridiculous and totally unfair, because the only way you can get back to that standard, those levels, is by playing games. And you know, the same can be said for Jacob Ramsey. For somebody who was a doubt for that game on Tuesday, I was actually surprised he was introduced, and it was almost painful watching JJ at times. He was lost positionally. Do you notice how many times Alex Moreno was gesturing for him to get wide and to overlap or to spread the field out this way? And he just got stuck in no man's land, almost hiding in a way. And I'm not worried because we saw how tidy their relationship was down the stretch last year. And then there's the mysterious case of Moussa Diaby, who at times earlier this season looked like a bargain at £50 million because he was polished with both feet, technically good, quick obviously, and his partnership with Ollie Watkins was bearing fruit consistently. Now, it's hard to know where he's actually playing. I mean, is he playing in the pocket behind Watkins, alongside Watkins? He oftentimes peels out wide right, but then he plays negative and turns the ball backwards. He seems very reluctant to drive the ball into the penalty area the way Leon Bailey does. And if he really does want to play as that number 10 type, which requires supreme technical ability, but the ability to make space as well, has he not quite yet caught up to the physicality of the Premier League in those areas of the field? Maybe more critically, though, was he passed on a very good opportunity to shoot in the first half, an opportunity he might have taken in the first part of the season and probably hit the target. I mean, he's a two-footed player, and on that occasion, he could have gone right-footed, but he didn't. He kind of passed the responsibility off, which is a sign of a player who is really lacking in confidence. And then there were a couple of other times where he gets into the box, and I so just want him to use his pace to drive the byline, get everybody's eyeballs on him for then to just hook it back into the danger area, like around the penalty spot. And in those times, it felt like he was rushing it, and he ended up playing square balls into the feet of defenders, because that's easy for them. You need teammates in good positions, but this wasn't the case. This was him rushing it, which again indicates maybe a lack of confidence right now. Here's where Unai Emery is going to have to earn his paycheck now, because if you're going about doing the same things over and over, but you're not getting results, well, then you are going insane. So is he going to try to tweak something, adjust something over here, maybe make a change in personnel, or will he just carry on and hope that the players work their way through it? Pau Torres is a huge miss for us. You could argue the whole thing is kind of built around his skill set. And dare I say that a healthy, but very physical and sometimes unpredictable John Duran might have caused that big backline more problems than they may have realized. And while we're crying over spilt milk, you know, Emi Buendia, with his very direct and high-risk actions, sometimes manages to find gaps in games like that. Let's hope he's training soon. He could be, you know. We might have him back, I'm hoping, for mid-March, and it's going to take a little time, obviously, for him to get back up to speed, but just to have more options coming in is going to be really important for us. Big moments, number 2, share and share alike. Conceding first, never ideal. Conceding from a corner, irritating. Conceding twice from corners within 4 minutes, that is basically a sword to the abdomen in any match. And we've seen examples where a team concedes and all of a sudden it's like they wake up, they snap into attention. Oh, we're playing now. We've got to respond. And Unai Emery always wants his teams to manage moments. Okay, you've been scored on, manage it now. Have a 10-minute spell where you have possession and then make something happen. The opposite happened. And when Newcastle got the second one, it only seemed to galvanize them further, and it completely changed the dynamics inside Villa Park. You could almost see the thought bubbles over top of the Villa players as they realize, uh-oh, we're 2 down. We haven't had so much as a sniff at goal, and there was a lot of thinking on the ball because of the pressure that the home side was under. Whereas earlier this year, it almost felt at times like it was telepathic. It was so fluid, like one player already knew what the other was going to do before they did it. That did not happen in this game. And you know, that 2-goal lead is sometimes a dreaded lead in all sports. One team maybe mentally settles, the other snaps to attention and goes into kind of a desperation mode. I never felt that desperation mode from Aston Villa until it turned into Bagel 3, which was another simple, sweeping counterattack, a basic 3-on-3. Oh my goodness. The one thing I will say, though, there were inquisitions after those 3 goals, but there wasn't sniping. There wasn't demonstrative blaming and yelling, and that's a sign of maturity, which I appreciate. Unai Emery's whole shtick, and I alluded to this earlier, and he's made no bones about it since walking through the door, is that he wants his teams to control the football and therefore control the match and, as importantly, moments in the match. But since the calendars turned, and actually probably, if we're being honest, well before that, we don't seem to have the same urgency to get the ball forward. Is that because of the opponents we've played? Because over the last couple of years, we've feasted on mid-table teams. We're getting into the front third. Maybe we're not creative. Maybe we're not ruthless enough. And one thing you don't see almost at all is us countering anybody anymore. We used to pinch the ball, rampage forward in 2s and 3s, and then make those counters, well, count. So what is it about this little phase we're in, and what is it about Newcastle? And the number one big issue that defined Villa 1, Newcastle 3, tactically toppled. It wasn't hard to figure out what Newcastle was trying to do out of possession, and that was at times to go man-to-man marking like Marcelo Bielsa would, but then it was to press hard and to press high, and we simply couldn't cope at times. You know, the problem with the Premier League is there are no secrets. You analyze a team through video analysis, and you see what makes them successful, but you can also see how other teams have success against them, and now you have the playbook. Chelsea did the same to us on Friday night. And sometimes for Newcastle, it was as many as 6, even 7 players pressing us. Now, not every Premier League team is going to have the horses to pull that off like Newcastle and Chelsea, but the approach is pretty clear. And that press was problem number uno. How do you solve problem number 1? Well, ideally, you have a defender who is so comfortable on the ball that he actually invites the pressure to play through that first line and get the midfielders on their way. And that's Pau Torres. But why he's even more special is if that's not on, he's still able to bypass everything and play it straight to the strikers with some measure of accuracy. So we don't have that. How many times in that first half hour were Kamara and Luiz and even McGinn at times able to even get on the ball? I didn't even know that Yuri Tielemans was playing for quite some times, and that's because of the suffocating pressure. Even if we got through that first wave, those next 4 guys were then closed down. I mean, there was absolutely nothing on in the middle part of the park. And so if our 4 central midfielders can't get on the ball, well, then we're resorting to long floated switches, or we're playing it past everybody and into the channels, or for Ollie Watkins and Moussa Diaby to try to run onto and ask them to win duels against a very big and physical Newcastle backline. And what flummoxes me again for the second time against this team this season, it felt like every single time they won the ball and were in transition, they were going to score. They created 5 big chances against us. The last time we allowed 5 big chances, our trip to Anfield. And if you combine both games, we have allowed a staggering 14 big chances to Newcastle this season. Eddie Howe, to his credit, has figured us out. A lot of categories took a hit after this game, most disappointingly the home record, of course, but we also conceded twice from set pieces, which meant that our first half plus minus also took a hit. And Newcastle, not right now a top or bottom 6 team, but usually we do really well against those middle pack teams because they neither press from the front or sit in a low block. Well, Newcastle certainly pressed from the front. I mean, it's going to take an awful lot to make these numbers start to look ordinary again, and I'm never going to take this past year for granted, but it still stings because it was completely counter to the recent historical nature of this fixture and the recent home versus away form between these two teams. Now comes the fascinating and million-dollar question: how do we respond at Sheffield United on Saturday? Because they gave us fits at Villa Park. We were fortunate to earn a point in that game. They lost at Palace on Tuesday despite a very early goal through Ben Barrett and Diaz, who they just signed. That's his second goal already. And you know Chris Wilder's going to have them whipped up at Bramall Lane because they're still in a relegation fight, and this is precisely the type of game that we do not do well in, and we haven't exactly set Bramall Lane on fire. The last time we won there was actually 6 years to the day of the Newcastle game on Tuesday when since-retired Robert Snodgrass banged home from outside the box in minute number 90. I am looking forward to this game about as much as I would 3 hours of dental surgery. My worry is that if fatigue truly is a factor right now as to why we're not looking fresh, well, that's not going to get any better between now and Saturday, or now Saturday and then the FA Cup game on Wednesday, because we simply don't have a whole lot of options right now through injury or recovery from injury. Although you wonder if Morgan Rogers might be available as early as this Saturday. I'll talk about his capture when I do an entire wrap-up of the January transfer window, which seemed to have one eye on the future, one eye on the purse strings, and then also some housekeeping. We've also been linked to a very big and young Australian goalkeeper in the last 24 hours. Isn't it weird how the feeling of losing is so much worse than the good feeling of winning? And, you know, when you've won as much as we have over the last year or so, there is this tendency to maybe take winning a little bit for granted, with perhaps a whiff of smugness thrown in. So here's a good reminder to never, ever take winning for granted, especially in the Premier League, where a win is never guaranteed, nor a table position, and there is always a treacherous obstacle right around the corner. Until Sheffield United, remain hopeful, and as always, up the mighty Villa.